You killed him.
No, I did not. I gave him life.
Take the infant's brain out and put it in the full-grown woman. Reanimate her and watch.
Jesus.
You'll never get credit for my discovery. Who's going to believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow.
These two are fighting and ideas are banging around in Bella's head and heart like lights in a storm.
Hello and welcome back to Journey Through Sci-Fi, where we journey through the many subgenres of science fiction on screen. I'm Matt.
And I'm James, and in this series we're exploring the sci-fi subgenre of mad science. And in today's episode we'll be looking at Re-Animator from 1985 and Poor Things from 2023.
Two of the absolute best to do it, James. Two incredible mad science movies and two that I absolutely love. Not to show my hand too much about what I think about these films, but I like that they're quite far away from each other on the spectrum of filmmaking. But why have we paired them together, James?
Well, they kind of go on from the legacy of Frankenstein, don't they? With the idea of making a creation, bringing someone back to life and what that creation does. And it's very much like these two are taking on that legacy and doing it in a slightly different way. Yeah,
a kind of reimagining and modern, maybe postmodern, even updatings of the Frankenstein story that's been the cornerstone of our mad science series so far.
Yeah, and there's lots of things that happen in this that happen in Frankenstein. You've got lots of body experiments, you've got corpses, like we said, being reanimated, brains are plenty, as we've had a load of already in this series on mad science. A lot of stuff we've seen before, but then also a lot of stuff we haven't seen quite in this way, I feel.
Yes, plenty of the new, plenty of the old things brought back to life and warmed up and reinvented, reanimated on screen. So with that, shall we start with Reanimator from 1985?
Sounds good to me.
This is not magic, as you say. I am a scientist. You?
So Re-Animator from 1985. This is directed by Stuart Gordon, produced by Brian Usner, who I think is, quite a big force in the overall Reanimator series because he goes on to direct the sequels and, he might be a bit of a big figure behind the camera as well. And starring, of course, my beloved Jeffrey Combs from Star Trek Deep Space Nine and many other Star Trek episodes in a career-defining performance as Herbert West.
It's so good, isn't it, his performance in this one? And what an amazing mad science film to be talking about. It's such a classic. It's loved by many, many fans of cult cinema. And it's like a gory 80s VHS mishmash of sci-fi and horror and all of that fun stuff that you get with that kind of era of cinema.
Yeah. When do you think you first saw, I take it you've seen it before today. When was the first time you saw Reanimator?
Oh, I was late to this. It wasn't until I must have been sort of like in my late 20s and everyone had been talking about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll get round to watching Reanimator at some point. And then it popped up on Prime Video and I watched it and I had a brilliant time.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I think I would have been, I don't know exactly when I saw it, probably in my late teens, I think. And I think I haven't seen it for a really long time, but kind of sometime after Evil Dead opened my eyes to a certain kind of filmmaking, and sometime before, University and Stan Brakhage and Jean Renoir, sent me off in another direction, and I was really enjoying this kind of VHS splatter film. That's when I would have caught Reanimator for the first time.
So the plot of Reanimator then, to talk about that briefly, you've got a medical student, Herbert West. He starts at this new university, this new college, and he invents a drug to bring the dead back to life. And of course, various other characters get embroiled in his sinister experiments and his plots to bring various creatures, cats to say one, human beings, lots of things back to life and reanimate them. So that's the main premise of this. You've got a crazy mad scientist trying to bring people back to life.
And his reanimation isn't very good, is another kind of
that's worth
core
noting.
point. Despite the ego, of Herbert West, the confidence in his own abilities, the God complex, he's actually very bad at reanimating dead humans.
But he's got a great serum. I mean, the serum looks great. It's exactly what they based the Substance serum on in terms of look.
Yes, of course, yeah.
This luminous green liquid inside a syringe, which is very sort of iconic iconography in this film. It's something which has endured since.
But it's quite economically used, isn't it? There's precious few close-ups from what I can remember of the syringes. It's just the brightness of it and the overall color palette of the film. It just really pops whenever you do get sight of one. Jeffrey Combs wields them brilliantly in various different ways. Right at the end, he's using them as like stabbing knife weapons when he goes, he's dual wielding them like he's Master Chief at the end of the movie. There's, he's got a very expressive use of it, and it just has that beautiful green pop on screen whenever it's there, including that final ending shot, of course, with where the what do you call it? The screen goes to black in a circle, just closing in on the green of the syringe that Dan is holding.
It's another one of those great sort of visual elements that you get in these mad science films, where you've got something really eye-catching on screen. And it made me think about when we watched the original Nutty Professor.
Yes,
and that transformation scene. Yeah, exactly.
The Nutty Professor and the original Flubber, the absent-minded professor. Yeah,
being absent-minded there, Matt.
Yes, the popping color, the lovely color palette of those films. Although I think I watched the
black and white, and then you watched the one with the color. So yeah,
I watched a colorized version of that, but with the purple Flubber in it.
And again, Flubber is sort of like, well, the modern day one with Robin Williams, very luminous green again. So that kind of color palette that you've got in these films is really interesting. But you've got this mad scientist of Herbert West, and the film opens with him already doing one of his experiments and it going wrong. And it's very it's quite a stark opening. You watch it and you're like, what's going on here? There's someone who's been injected with something, his face explodes. All that Dr. West says is he took too much, I brought him back, or something like that. It's lines to that effect. And I remember watching that, and I think every time I've watched that, I'm like, oh, well, this is like a scene which we're going to go back to later on, and it's going to get explained.
Yeah.
But I always forget that, no, it's just the opening with his original professor, Dr. Hans Gruber.
Hans Gruber, 1985. Were you Googling that at the start of the film?
I was.
What's going on here?
Like, damn.
I think it's just coincidence. It seems to be.
Yeah, I was like, Hans Gruber from Die Hard or from this? But no, this Reanimator got to Dr. Gruber first. Hans Gruber is this is the first instance of that name being used in the film. So I don't know if they used it again in Die Hard based off this, or if it was just one of those crazy coincidences.
I don't know. Die Hard is also based on a book that came out, I think, before Reanimator. But I have no idea if the name Hans Gruber is from that book, because I think it's quite different.
Because this, like you say, this was based off of a Lovecraft book, wasn't it? It's a serial novel or something like that, wasn't it? This one, there were
a serialized short story. It's not very good. I think it's sort of widely regarded as at least one of Lovecraft's worst stories. I think even he wasn't very happy with it. I read it. It's really short, and because it's serialized, it's 6 serialized chapters. But it's like really old timey anime, because every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, and then maybe about a third of the next chapter recaps everything that's happened since.
Ooh.
So there's precious little action in any of these incredibly short chapters, and it's mostly recapping what happened last time, and like every single chapter has this same descriptive sentence of him being a small man with blonde hair and glasses. Like, I don't know why Lovecraft thought it was important to remind us that every single time, but yeah.
Lovecraft is known for being very descriptive, right? Like all of his works were very sort of like, and this is the exact description of Cthulhu and all this kind of stuff.
I don't really know his style, to be honest. I think this is actually the only Lovecraft I've ever read, his worst one.
That's interesting as well, because all of his other stuff is mainly on the cosmic horror side of things.
Yes. Yeah.
So for this one to be a bit more real life, well, not real life, but the science fiction elements of this come in a different form, don't they? They're in labs and experiments and formulas. But I think it does have that kind of, because cosmic horror is all about the fear of the out there kind of stuff, the unknown of it. And this is kind of a unknown variable in this serum that Dr. West has made. So it's kind of, he's dealing with otherworldly things by bringing people back to life. So that kind of feels like the connection to Lovecraft's cosmic horror stuff, because
maybe
it's more universal.
I think in the story he's maybe more interested in the nature of the soul and what lies beyond. Certainly, so the narrator is unnamed, but it's essentially the Dan Kane character from the movie. And he's particularly interested in this idea of like, what are these corpses going to tell us about the void beyond life, when they come back? That's the kind of cosmic horror element that Lovecraft is maybe playing with in the story. I don't really think the movie gets into that, really, does it? It's much more of a 1980s zombie take.
And I was surprised, I'm always surprised about how funny this is as well.
It's laugh out loud funny.
Exactly, because the comedy in this is so genius, because it's so sort of hammy and ridiculous, this story and the characters in it and what's happening. And I feel like Stuart Gordon and Brian Usner have really sort of brought that out in this. And it feels like such an important part of this, being this 80s comedy, sci-fi horror. I think all of those elements really made its cult status more official, because it was kind of doing that formula which would get used again and again around this time, of the kind of the comedy horror cult stuff, where it's like very splatter gore and all that kind of stuff. So I really liked that aspect of it. And I think when I first watched this way back when, I didn't expect it to be so funny. But I mean, I should have known. I mean, the tagline on the poster is Herbert West has a good head on his shoulders and another one on his desk. So start as you mean to go on.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think, tonally it's incredibly similar to The Evil Dead, and maybe more specifically Evil Dead 2, although that's getting more towards like out and out comedy. It is laugh out loud funny at points, but not many points. But when it's not being funny, like straight up funny, there's just a tremendous sense of fun throughout the film, even when it's not being actually trying to make jokes and stuff. It's that combination of special effects, having an awful lot of fun with the special effects, really good, gooey, bloody special effects that they're having a lot of fun playing around with, combined with, pitch perfect performances all around. It's not just Jeffrey Combs steals every scene out from under everybody else in the film, but everybody else also completely understands the assignment, don't they?
Yeah.
They're completely on board with it. Bruce Abbott as Dan Kane isn't as fun as Jeffrey Combs, but he's the straight man. He has to be that. He has to be there to react to him and be the normal guy so that Jeffrey Combs can shine in those scenes. So it's that combination of elements that just makes it incredibly fun to watch, even when it's not being a funny movie.
And also like horror icon Barbara Crampton playing Megan Halsey in this as well is just having a lot of fun with the role and doing all of that kind of scream queen behavior throughout. And then if you look at the other people in the cast as well, like the guy playing Dr. Carl Hill, David Gale. Now he looks Like, he's got a very sort of iconic look.
He looks a bit like he's got a, how would you describe his face? He's got a long, gaunt face. He looks a bit like Lurch.
Yeah, it's kind of that Vincent Price, all of those kind of like classic horror actors who have really striking features. And I think he leans into that as well with his acting in this. He's really having a lot of fun with being this treacherous, like leechy, slimy doctor who is supposed to be teaching these students, but is also at the same time keeping a file with Barbara Crampton's character's hair and all of this weird stuff. So I think he's doing just such a good job with that character, and all of the stuff that happens later on when he gets reanimated, and the fun that he has then when he's just playing a head that is being carried around by a body. That's just, it's so good. All of the performances in this.
Yeah, everybody's on great form and just completely understands the tone of the film, and that's so important. But we should talk about Herbert as a mad scientist, shouldn't we? How do you feel he compares to, or where do you feel he sits in the pantheon? But how do you feel he compares to Victor Frankenstein? Because this is like Lovecraft was trying to reimagine or parody even Frankenstein when he wrote the short story. So how do you think he compares to Victor Frankenstein?
Well, he has that same sense of ambition, doesn't he? But he's kind of got the I forget, sort of like in Frankenstein, it feels like people, especially in the Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein, he's kind of shunned for his ideas, and he's very radical in his theories. And Herbert West is taking all of that on board as well. He's in lectures and he's having a go at his teacher, and he's just full of snidey remarks, and he thinks he is better than everybody else. Yeah. And this kind of superiority complex that he's got is what makes him quite diabolical as a mad scientist, because he's drinking his own Kool-Aid. He's totally invested in his beliefs about what happens after you die and bringing people back to life. And he just dismisses his professor's claims of a brain going brain dead after 6 to 12 minutes. Was it something like that he says?
Something like that, yeah. He's
very specific about the timings, and he's like, no, that's not right. You are wrong, and you've been plagiarizing my former teacher and all this kind of stuff. So I think that kind of element of him and that nastiness that he has is a sort of accentuated version of Victor Frankenstein, because in all of the adaptations of Frankenstein we've seen, he's flawed, but he comes back around later on.
He has regret.
Yeah, he has regret about what he's doing. West doesn't have that. He's just, even to the point when he dies and he's being killed by some intestines that have been brought back to life, which is brilliant and very Lovecraftian. The first thing he thinks about is, take my notes, take my research. His
legacy.
My legacy is what is important. So he's so driven, and I think that's the main comparison to me. That's the main comparison to me. That's the main comparison for me.
Interesting.
Between Frankenstein. It's all slipping out now on the podcast.
He's all ego up to his very last breath, isn't he? Is he sacrificing himself in that last moment to sort of end it all? Because you're absolutely right. That final act is save my notes. It is all about legacy, and that is pure ego. But I was trying to figure out if that's a moment of self-sacrifice. It's obvious, even if it is, it's obviously too little, too late to sort of redeem him as a character. But is that what he's doing at the very end of the movie?
I don't know. I think he's just more bothered about his notes. I don't think he could really care less. And also there's sequels, but we'll talk about the sequels later. I don't know exactly how those carry on from this one. But yeah, it didn't feel like he was sacrificing himself. It felt like his luck had run out by the end of it.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was kind of supposed to be a redemption moment, but I think that's it, isn't it? He's Frankenstein. He's all the ego of Frankenstein, and just never having that moment of clarity and regret that brings him back from the edge. But of course, the results are, they're no better for either of them. Like it doesn't go better for Frankenstein just because he has that moment of regret. Obviously everything goes to shit for Frankenstein and he ends up in the Arctic and dies there, so it doesn't really sort of benefit him in his story anyway. But yeah, we've seen that a lot, that sort of sliding scale of where the hubris meets up with the kind of realization that you've done wrong in your mad science. And for Herbert, if it happens, it's happening at the very end and still tied to a moment of ego. So he's a creature of pure ego all the way throughout his life. And he's a nasty little shit as well.
He is a nasty little shit. But do you think there's like a way you can view him as kind of, because he's rebellious, isn't he? And he's very much against the institutions and authority. He thinks he is better than the rules and regulations that have been put onto him by like the medical people at the hospital, all of this kind of stuff. What do you think it says about his motivations that he is so, because I think it's a similar thing to Frankenstein, right? Like he considers and most mad scientists, like if you go back to The Fly, it's when the science isn't moving quick enough for the scientist. So they want to do things straight away without doing all the precautions. And that's when the experiments go wrong. So do you feel like West is kind of battling that of authority in this?
Well, yes. I mean, yes, he is obviously engaged in a battle with authority. But I think, are you asking like whether that makes him likable and compelling?
Because like he's a rebel.
Right, yeah. No, because he's, he's completely unhinged, and all of the results of his experiments are completely disastrous and deadly, and he's the bad guy. He's the villain of this movie. But is he a compelling villain to watch? Yes, absolutely. And that is all about the tone of the film and the storytelling outside of the universe of Reanimator. He's absolutely, you want him to continue being a villain and a more successful villain because it's fun. It's fun to watch. This is a horror movie. You want to see some horror. So yes, I want Herbert to continue reanimating corpses. And the Chekhov's gun of this movie is that he keeps on trying to do it, and then it doesn't work, and he says, it wasn't a fresh enough corpse. So what has to happen at some point in the film is Herbert has to kill someone, because that is the freshest corpse that he's going to get his hands on. And you can't root for that. That's not that's not heroic, but it's compellingly told so that it makes you want to see it, because you want the satisfying conclusion of that horror.
And there is that kind of obsession with what would happen if you bring someone back from the dead, and being like a failed experiment in this at the beginning when he first starts doing it and trying to figure out how his reanimating agent would work in this kind of scenario. It's interesting because people are fascinated with life after death and cheating death and immortality and all that kind of stuff. And the West is very much driven by that aspect of it. And again, we've seen this time and time again in these mad science films where people are trying to come back from the brink. Do you think this is the ultimate test of science? That if you could do this, then it's like the big thing they're trying to conquer.
Conquering death, is such a recurring element of this whole mad science series that's the thing that keeps coming up in so many of the movies. We've done lots of different. We covered Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. There's all sorts of things you can do with mad science, but the really compelling idea that draws writers and filmmakers back time and time again is breaking that barrier. But also with it comes that really compelling narrative of transgression, which is that we want so desperately to do it, but everybody inherently knows that it's wrong to do it. So that tension is what keeps coming back up in these mad science films. And again, it goes to why he's compelling, because we understand it and know it to be wrong. So you can be a little bit on side with that while also knowing that he is the bad guy of the movie, and you don't agree with it, but you're like, yeah, but I know why he wants to defeat death. We all do. I think we can all understand that, if not agree with it.
Yeah, because it's a fear, and it's a fear that everyone will have at some point in their lives, and it's like a constant looming thing. And this isn't trying to do this in a kind of magical way, although it is like science fiction. It does have that kind of pseudoscience element to it. The way that it's trying to be like, okay, so how do we solve this? This is a person who's obsessed with solving things and finding the theory and proving something. And I think that kind of obsession is what brings forth the sort of madness in these characters as well, which we keep seeing again and again. But thinking about this film as a product of the 80s as well. So this was a time when there's lots of anxieties around sort of technology and biology. There's these new breakthroughs that are happening at the time. And bearing in mind, this book or this serialization was done in 1922, and then we're getting this film in the 80s now. How do you feel that it kind of takes on some of the fears that were happening in the 80s? Do you think there was anything in particular? Because we talked about The Fly, and we talked about sort of the AIDS epidemic at the time and all of that kind of like fear around that. Do you think you can feel that in this film?
I don't know if it speaks as directly to those things as for example, The Fly does, which is much more explicitly a piece of art about disease and sexual disease in particular. So I just don't think that's what's trying to be achieved. This is so much more. This is more in line with like exploitation movies, isn't it? This is about violence and special effects and fun within that. And that's why also I think it doesn't speak to the kind of cosmic horror stuff that is not very well articulated in the story. But it, you can see it's an interest of Lovecraft, and it's kind of, at the edges of the story. I just don't think that's really what Stuart Gordon and Brian Usner have like picked up on. I don't know. What do you think? Are you seeing those kind of fear of AIDS and stuff like that in this movie?
For me, it feels more like the fear of technology mixing in with that kind of medical science at the time, because it's showing the human body like something like you can fix, and almost machine-like as well, because the way that these bodies are reanimated is kind of like, okay, so what you do is like a very methodical, mechanical way of doing stuff. You put the serum, you put it in the back of the neck, you do this, they come back to life, they're alive, they do this, but then it's got that body horror element to it, and this kind of fear around medicine and the new sciences that are coming in, and can we sort of fix things and make things better. And it's sort of almost a precursor to what you get nowadays as well, because now it's sort of all supplements, and how can you improve this machine, this body that you've got. So it feels a bit like, in this kind of mad science that we're looking at here, it's the way to lengthen life and improve it and create the perfect kind of being. I mean, that's almost what that's pretty much what most of these mad scientists do. But I think West isn't really looking at it from that viewpoint. He is just looking at it as, I am right. It doesn't really matter if he's doing these things. He's like, no, this is right. I've got this theory. I've got this reanimating agent. His whole thing is about being right.
Yeah, and doing it because he can, because he is smart enough to do it, and he's the best. He's a very interesting doctor character. We really don't see him ever do anything particularly like medical in the sense of helping people who are unwell. He doesn't want to conquer death because he wants to make people live for longer. He just wants to conquer death to be the man who conquered death. Legacy. It's just legacy for him. So yeah, he's not much of a doctor.
How do you feel the other doctors are in comparison to him? So like take Dan
Yeah,
Kane.
Dan Kane, diehard doctor.
But he
awesome.
He just wants to get his medical degree so that he can marry like
Yeah.
the Dean's daughter. So he's got an objective to doing it.
But he's also, but we have that kind of introduction to him where he's this cannot give up on a patient doctor.
Yeah.
He will be doing CPR well after it's, it should be called and stuff like that. So he is he's at least a real doctor in the sense of a fictional sci-fi doctor. He cares about life. He cares about life, whereas Herbert cares about conquering death. That's the difference. So you can see how Dan gets roped in. He has a medical interest in what Herbert is trying to do. That's why he can't resist, and Herbert is able to exploit that and manipulate that. But he can see that in Dan. He knows that he is also interested in preventing, stopping, reversing death. But he is interested from a medical standpoint, I think, and viewing it as a doctor would, to save lives, not for ego and hubris reasons.
So he's got more of a less mad scientist view on it, because his whole thing is like, okay, I'm going to save lives with this.
Sure.
Yeah.
He's less of the traditional, like, God complex mad scientist, but he's still getting drawn into a world of mad science and, and all the repercussions of that. And then in the end, I think, he's rewarded by being like the action hero at the end of the film, like that. He's down to his vest,
Yeah, I
Bruce
noticed
Willis
that as
style,
well.
with an axe. Like, so he gets this kind of badass like moment at the end of the film, rather than having to be swallowed up by an intestine monster as punishment for his transgressions in a narrative sense.
But then we've also got Dr. Hill. So he's got that hubris and that desire to win and be proved right that West has. But his whole ethos is, I'm going to take other people's inventions and theories and I will get the glory for them. So he is a glory hunter, isn't he? That's his whole motivation for this film.
Well, he's not so different from Herbert, is he? Just basically less good at it. Yeah, exactly. He hasn't got the skills and the intelligence that Herbert has, but he's just as much of a ego-driven bastard.
Yeah, to the point where that ego transcends his death, doesn't it? Because we see other reanimated corpses in this. Like, you see Dean Halsey, like, he gets reanimated, but is it because he's not reanimated soon enough that he doesn't have as much cognitive function as Dr.
It's
Hill?
always just a sliding scale of how recently deceased they were. And with Hill, Herbert whacks him on the head, cuts his head off, and immediately puts the head in a tray, and then just like squirts the reagent into the tray or something like that. It's immediate reanimation, and that's why it actually works with, to the extent you can say it works, because it still goes a bit haywire, but it works better with Hill than it does with anyone. There's been a few. What happens with Halsey? He's attacked by. It is pretty quick with Halsey, isn't it? He's attacked by the reanimated monster, I guess.
Yeah.
And then they do it pretty quickly. But the explanation is it just wasn't quite quick enough, I think.
It's teased at that he might still have some sort of like brain function, that he could communicate that he was killed and what happened, because Dr. Hill lobotomizes him, doesn't he?
Ah, of course. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So
To hide, to cover things up, or just because he's a quack doctor who likes to do lobotomy.
he gets very obsessed with that towards the end when he's lobotomizing every single reanimated corpse he can find. But with the Dean as well, I think it's that idea that he's so driven by his hatred for Dan Kane as well. Like, he is very angry at him because he's done what he said he basically said, don't go and do this. You are insane. And he's kind of a bit protective over his daughter as well. And you get kind of some sort of, he has that kind of redemption arc as well, in a slightly lowercase redemption arc, where he is trying to save his daughter at the end, kind of, when there's all those zombies, even though he's been lobotomized and is a reanimated corpse. There's that kind of stuff driving him, and he seems like he's a bit more driven by those kind of primal forces than obviously Dr. Hill, who is very much still like, my personality is all about getting the glory and still getting what I want at the end of the day, even when my head's been chopped off and I've got my body carrying me around in a tray
the
full of
wax
blood.
head. The decapitated corpse with the wax head is from the Lovecraft story. That is a core element of it.
The wax head is so funny. It's
Yes.
it's so good. Just like wandering around with this, but it's a genius idea. If you
You
are
have to hide the fact that you've been decapitated.
yeah, genius.
Yeah.
How's she
Oh,
going to
yeah,
do it?
fair
It's
enough.
like, get something where if you work in a medical university, just pick up a head. Sure.
Yeah. Speaking of moments of comedy, the sneaking past the security guards, carrying your own decapitated head in a bag.
I kept thinking he was going to stitch himself back together or something. I was
Yes.
very surprised by the fact that he just remains in the tray.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite bits is when he gets the blood poured on him and he has this
Yeah.
kind of like orgasmic look on his
Yeah,
face
yeah.
as he's like getting bathed in blood.
Like he's sort of drinking it up through the neck. Like,
Oh, that is not a nice sound for podcasting, Matt. But yeah, and then yet they have a lot of fun with that, don't they? There's obviously the infamous scene with the head giving head,
yeah.
which got that got banned from British like releases of the film.
Oh,
as
did it?
well.
Oh, boo.
So yeah, and it's those little bits which have kind of they've carried on and they become like, it's like when you watch a 18 or something when you're younger and you go, yeah, you know what happens in this, there's this thing.
Yeah.
And like, don't tell anyone, but you know, and then you get it like it's really built up in your head. And then you finally see it and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's one of those kind of moments in this.
Yeah. The cat, I would say, is up there with that
The
as well.
cat's so good.
Dan throwing the cat full force at wall was an incredible moment.
And then bringing the cat back again. So the cat
Again,
gets
yeah,
brought back
another
twice.
time, yeah.
I found it quite disturbing just seeing the cat in the fridge.
Yeah.
Just having a cat in your fridge, in your room. There's something not great about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good horror as well as
is.
the comedy in it.
It is. If you found your flatmate at the time had a dead cat in his fridge by his bed.
Yeah, I simply don't think I'd be as forgiving as Dan is. He's
It's like, oh yeah, sure, you must,
man.
yeah. And he believes West so quickly as well.
Yeah.
Whereas Barbara Crampton's not having any of it.
Barbara Crampton's a bit more wise to it and more of a cat lover, I suppose, even though I think it is Dan's cat. Anyway, so why do you think this has remained in people's minds as an enduring cult movie?
I think because they're having so much fun with it. And there are lots of zombie films out there, these 80s gore fests that exist. But I think this one, it's got a lot of charm to it as well. Like those moments that they have with the special effects, it's the comedy elements of it, it's the performances. And I just think they really kind of capture that element of the mad science as well, because it's so mad that it's funny and ridiculous. And I think when they lean into that, it just works really well.
Yeah, I think all of those things are true. I think it is a brilliantly made, fun sci-fi horror B movie, and it would be that, in any case. And then I think that you add in just a genuinely legendary, perfect performance from Jeffrey Combs. I think that's what tips it over the edge. I can think of very few examples of just such perfect casting in a movie. It is up there with Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead 2, Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, an actor who is just utterly perfect for the role and doing the best job they can at that role, that it just becomes something transcendent above, everything else that's good about the film.
And just the way it all spirals into that chaos at the end.
Yeah.
When you've got all of those bodies coming back to life and it all goes wrong. It's just grotesque and slapstick and ridiculous. And yeah, they're having a lot of fun with this one.
And they made 2 more, I think. I haven't seen any of the sequels. And I don't really understand how Herbert comes back for the second one, but I understand that they're working in a war somewhere together, which again is actually from the Lovecraft story. They go off to the First World War so that Herbert can have access to bodies, and in the second film they go to Peru, and work as doctors there.
So is that Dan Kane and Herbert West both returning characters in that?
Yeah, but I don't know why Herbert's alive.
That's
I haven't seen it.
And so do they? Well, I'd love to know if they have Megan return, because obviously it ends with Megan supposedly being brought back to life, and then I know one of the other sequels is called The Bride of Reanimator.
Yeah, so that's the second one. Yeah, it's Bride of Reanimator. But I don't know if it's Megan or not.
Well, maybe we'll have to find that out on maybe like a Patreon special or something like that, where we can look at some of these sequels, because yeah, this is a real classic and a real fun sci-fi horror. You've got a mad scientist who is reanimating people and bringing people back to life. And in the next film that we're going to be talking about, we've got a similar kind of scenario, but it gets kind of twisted up. And instead of spiraling into chaos, it kind of spirals into a story about gaining freedom. Let's talk about Poor Things from 2023.
Hi listeners, hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to support us and get access to hundreds of hours of bonus episodes, you can sign up to our Patreon.
We've got discussions on all the latest sci-fi films in cinemas, the Bad Movie Bunker, and Patrons Picks, as well as mini-series covering your favourite franchises.
Patrons get to have their say on what we cover, both over on Patreon and right here on the main show too.
So if you want to join, head over to patreon.com/Journey Through Sci-Fi.
Now, back to the episode.
Where did she come from?
She's an experiment. She's progressing at an accelerated pace. I can't let you go.
If you do not, Bella shall turn rotten with hate. I must set forth into waters.
Another absolutely brilliant film. Like I said at the start, the other end of the spectrum, really, in terms of filmmaking. Although there's some cheery, fun gore in this film as well. They have a little bit of fun with that, but it's not kind of the main thrust of the movie. The main thrust is a different kind of thrust in this movie. What are your overall thoughts on this film and, the plot and the mad science, I suppose, as well?
I think this is great. I really like Poor Things, and I think watching this after Reanimator as well was a treat, because they both got those kind of comedy elements to it, but this has a bit more kind of sarcasm about life, and it's the kind of the dark black comedy elements of it. They really sort of play around with this Frankenstein mythos. You've got a female character that is not the sort of like traditional creation that you've seen in these films before, like A Bride of Frankenstein or Weird Science, which we talked about. It's a different kind of framing, and it's all told from this kind of female perspective as well, which I think really makes this a much more interesting film compared to some of the other sort of derivative versions of Frankenstein that there have been in the past. I think this has like a different lens on everything, which makes it interesting.
Yeah. It's it's a reimagining of the Frankenstein story. It goes off in lots of different directions, and even I think dissects some of the tropes and elements and kind of moves them around and shifts them around. Look at the kind of what Godwin looks like physically. Sort of moving the physicality of the creature onto the creator here. But but all of that, I think it all seems to stem maybe from a central idea of how we look at the creation itself, and how put a different lens on the creation's story and existence and experience of the world. And what if Frankenstein's creation was a beautiful woman? So not immediately shunned by society, but as far away from that reaction, still a kind of bad reaction to the creation, an unpleasant reaction by society, but at the complete other end of the scale of what society wants to do to a created being when it's a beautiful woman instead of a sort of deformed man.
And this beautiful woman is played by Emma Stone, and she's playing the character of Bella Baxter in this film. So there's lots of stuff that's alluded to at the beginning. There's lots of fake stories that she's fed by Godwin as to what her origin story was. Initially, he says, "Oh, your parents died, and I took you in to look after you." And you do, when you first watch this film, you think, okay, so she's been brought back to life. She is this creation, because you see right at the opening, you see a figure diving into the Thames. And at that point, you think, okay, so he's brought her back to life in some way or used her parts to create a new creature. But it gets much more on the sci-fi side of things with the actual explanation as to who Bella actually is. Would you like to explain who Bella is?
Well, Bella's a new person, let's say, but she is made of the body of her own mother and the brain of her own daughter. So she's pregnant when she takes her own life and jumps off the bridge at the start of the movie when Godwin finds her, and he takes the brain of the baby and puts it in the head of the mother, and the resulting new person he names Bella Baxter, and sort of raises as his daughter. And that in itself is another really important distinction from the Frankenstein story, isn't it? That the creator doesn't immediately reject the creation and does foster that parental dynamic that the creature really wants in Frankenstein and doesn't get from Frankenstein. But Godwin goes too far the other way, keeps her essentially captive, and wants to have this, what he calls, a level of scientific control over her as an experiment, but it's imprisonment, and it's restriction on her freedoms, but with a kind of with what I think is a genuine parental love there as well. But Godwin's all fucked up, so his sort of interpretation of parental love is through this lens of cruel scientific experiment from his own father.
Yeah, so that's a story that we're told by Godwin. So it's that kind of unreliable narrator thing that you've got in the back of your mind when he tells these stories about what his father did to him.
Are you not sure about
I don't know.
that
I was
sort of
thinking
origin
about
story?
it this time, and I was looking at it and I was like, is he telling the truth, or is he just spinning a yarn to try and explain some sort of experimentations that have happened to him, like he's done himself, or something a bit more complicated? But I think that's the whole thing with this. It's you could never quite, I mean, the way Yorgos Lanthimos is putting things in place in this film, you do feel like Godwin Baxter has that kind of fatherly parental love for Bella. But there is also that side of him. Does he have a bit of a god complex in some sort of shape or form, like these other mad scientists?
Well, his name is Godwin, but he goes by God.
yeah.
And he wants his daughter not to call him father or dad.
Just call me God.
Yeah.
So I think some of that gets like cloaked in that like fatherly like feelings that he shows for Bella, and I think some of that gets all muddled up in this as well, because it is a coming of age story as well, isn't it? You're seeing Bella grow up through this film, but it's at an accelerated rate. Like everything is accelerated in terms of her growth, including like how quickly her hair grows and how quickly she picks up other words. So I think initially when like I first watched this, I think I kind of thought, oh, maybe she is still a child at this point, but she's not, because she is growing at this rate. She's growing really fast. She's just packing a lot of experiences in very quickly. So it's kind of like how you view her character, because she takes ownership over what she's doing and she's kind of the agent of her own story, but she does get manipulated by some of these people that come into her life throughout the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do you feel about sort of like her growth as a person and sort of development as this creation that Godwin's made?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of sci-fi read of it and a more philosophical read of it, which is like the sci-fi read of it is, what are the physiological implications of putting a baby's brain in an adult body? Like, how quickly can a human brain develop without the kind of physiological barriers of a tiny baby body that can't do it, literally, like, that doesn't have a functioning nervous system and can't do anything? How does that develop, and how does that mind interact with the world and become a person? And it happens more rapidly for Bella. But I think the more kind of important way of exploring that in this film is the more philosophical question of, like, how can a person create themselves? How does a human mind interpret itself and its own personhood and create that and develop it itself, rather than the kind of, I think it's using that sci-fi framing to explore that more philosophical question. What's always at tension in the film is there's lots of sexual politics at tension in the film, but there's a big weird question around Bella's own sexual maturity. She has the brain of a baby, so when you're looking at it from that kind of like sci-fi context, it's like, is she a child that's having sex, that's being manipulated into sex by all these grown men? And yes, she is, but also we're watching it as a sort of coming of age, like you say, a person creating themselves, and part of that is this sexual journey that she goes on. And those two things it's awkward, and it feels quite awkward throughout the film, all the way through. But I think that Lanthimos handles that really well. I never feel uncomfortable in that tension. I think he juggles all of that quite nicely with a good sense of humour as well, and you never feel horrified by what could be a horrible concept.
I think also when I was watching it this time with the sort of my mad science hat on, looking at Bella's actions, she is operating like a scientist, like Godwin has taught her. So she's very methodical about everything she does. She is experimenting with different aspects of life, and she's just very, very much just as much the sort of mad scientist in this as Godwin is. She is doing these little experiments. Some of them go wrong. She's testing things out, and then is developing as we go along. Did you feel like that way as well when you were watching this?
A little bit, but I hadn't thought of it quite the way you're framing it there. It's really interesting. Is she the mad scientist of this movie?
It feels like it. You could read it as that in some ways, because she is doing all of these things because she wants to do them. It feels like people are trying to, like, if you look at the sort of going up against authority that Herbert West is doing, she's doing a similar thing with Godwin. This is the authority figure in my life. These are the regulations you put on me. I'm going to not adhere to these regulations. I'm going to go off into the world and do this because I want to, and I want to find out what will happen if I do this.
And then the authority becomes social mores and society, and then she's butting up against that.
Yeah, because she's always like, well, why don't you just, when she discovers about pleasure and things like that, she's like, well, why don't you do this all the time? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why are you putting these strict regulations on yourself? Why can't we be freer? And I think that's just a really interesting theme that is running through the film.
Yeah, definitely. When I was watching it, in terms of like who is the mad scientist, I was thinking on this rewatch, is the real mad scientist of this Godwin's father, who has done all of these horrible, who's tortured his son Godwin in the name of science, in the name of mad science even. And then Godwin is just passing on this generational trauma, and then it's passed down to Bella, and it's up to Bella to sort of break that generational cycle and reject that and just close it off and escape from it.
That kind of nature versus nurture kind of thing again, which we're seeing. And because Godwin is, you're saying, like the way he is acting as a father figure, because he does let her go, and he does kind of...
Exactly, yeah.
He drugs Max and then lets her go off. So, yeah, maybe there is that element to it as well within this. But I think it is still that idea that she is growing at this accelerated rate, but then is still technically a baby's brain inside a grown woman's body. And then that idea of like who she is like what we're constantly exploring. But the way that we're exploring this world as well is through her eyes. So everything seems much more fantastical. And obviously the film is in different sort of like color palettes almost as well. So you start off with the very black and white universal horror, going back to Frankenstein look of the entire film. And then you get into these really sort of vibrant sceneries that we're seeing, which kind of look like Victorian England, but it's kind of steampunk as well. Yeah. And I think even the way they shot this was they shot some of the settings in a certain film to bring out the vibrance in them with all of these.
It's a weird aspect ratio, I noticed.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's from whatever decision there was made. And there's loads of use of very wide angle lenses, and at times, full on fisheye lenses. It feels like when it's fisheye, it feels like we're sort of peering out onto the world, as Bella probably also feels like at times. But sometimes it's just like a very wide angle lens, just for interesting expressionist reasons, I suppose. But yeah, it's not exactly like mad science behind the camera, is it? It's just a creative and interesting way of presenting the film. But do you think it's, to an extent, seeing through Bella's eyes, as Bella's seeing the world differently at different stages of her life?
Yeah, I think she starts seeing the world differently because you see things in black and white when you're younger, and then she's seeing more color in the world, and then things just seem a little bit. There's still all the colour there, but it doesn't seem as fantastical as when she's having those first experiences in like Lisbon and all those places she visits, like when she's on the boat.
Yeah,
and
it becomes less and less fantastical. You see fewer things like steampunk zeppelins or whatever, like you see in Lisbon. By the time we're in Paris, and then definitely when she's all like locked up in Alfie's house at the end of the movie, it just looks like The Favourite then.
Yeah.
Which is a very naturalistic looking film. But it kind of goes on that journey along with Bella, doesn't it?
But it's really nicely bookended in terms of those sort of like scenes as well, because when she does end up going to her mother's husband's house, who thinks that she is her mother, Alfie, when she's there.
That's interesting. Wait, but that's interesting because you think that the person that Bella is the mind, is the brain inside Bella. You say that she's going to her mother's house. You don't say that she's going to her own house.
I think so, because technically she is a different person, isn't she? Because she feels a bit.
Well, no, I mean, you think that she's the baby.
Yeah, I think
not a different person, not a new person, Bella, but you think of her as the baby.
I think so, but she's just in this form. But she is that.
I think that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
The mind being the person, but I think there's an element of there's like a separation from either entity. There's a great line at the end that when she gets back to God, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't create you. I didn't create Felicity. You created Bella Baxter," which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I always think that Bella Baxter is neither the baby nor the mother. But go on. Sorry, you were talking about going back to that house with Alfie.
Well, I was just thinking about, like, when I was watching it, it's all of the red flooring, which looks like blood, that you're seeing throughout the entire, like, all of the hallways. It's all very stylized, and that kind of makes you think about the initial bits when Bella is being created, and she's being created from death and like lifeblood and all that kind of stuff. And those kind of comparisons felt quite prominent at that point, just because it's so, and then it's also that kind of something bad is happening at this point. Everything around it seems bad. So she's in a bad situation, and how is she going to get out of this and this kind of thing? And I really like that element of the sort of the bookending of that bit.
Yeah, it's a very oppressive opulence in that house that she ends up in at the end. The giant doors that she's walking through. It feels just the way it's filmed. You know, it's like it's a massive, massive house, but it feels so claustrophobic at the same time. It's also full, but feels so completely empty because it's so devoid of life, despite being full of lovely cabinets and what have you.
You said like this got all these. Well, it's like a philosophical journey as well, this film, in terms of how you view Bella and her development. How do you think all of those social interactions that she has throughout the film shape her character by the end? Do you feel like she's like taken advantage of, or do you think that she has more power than just, say, your average Born Sexy Yesterday character who's kind of led along the way? Like if you look at Rocky from Rocky Horror Picture Show and that kind of thing. Or is she a bit more autonomous in her actions?
It's sort of both, isn't it? Like she's absolutely taken advantage of, mostly by Duncan, but also by the men in Paris, and even Harry the cynic to an extent. Although he sort of he apologizes and he makes good, but like everyone is taking advantage of her, but she's also getting something out of those interactions. She's learning, and I think that she sees a trade-off in those interactions, and she's happy with it. And even when she's getting like taken advantage, Duncan takes her away because he just wants to have sex with her, but she likes having sex. So, yes, he is taking her and taking advantage of her, but she is getting something that she likes out of that. And she never remains trapped by any of the people who are trying to keep her trapped. She either just leaves or she engineers the situation so that she's in control of it and then leaves anyway. But, she never becomes trapped by any of these people who would seek to manipulate her. So yes, she's being manipulated, but she's always continuing to gain something from those interactions, getting what she wants from it, and then moving on.
And that idea of her, like going back to the sort of the child brain aspect of it, it made me think about Alien Earth as well, where you've got characters which are like they're kids, but they're given adult bodies all of a sudden. But this is like a different stage of the development, so that she's always been an adult in this, whereas in that you've got these childlike brains trying to adapt to suddenly being in a different body. So,
children who know they're children, and Bella's not aware that she's a child.
So she never really has that kind of that view of herself, does she? She's just learning stuff quickly at a pace. But then you compare her to the other creation that Godwin makes, played by Margaret Qualley, and she's very different because she doesn't have that kind of accelerated learning, and there's never really an explanation for that, but it just makes it more unique that Bella is the way that she is.
I wondered if there was a sort of power of love kind of message there in terms of Bella's development, because Godwin becomes his father a little bit with Felicity. Not as monstrous as his father was to him, but callous. There's a bit where she's painting on the walls, and I think it is red paint.
Yeah.
But when the scene starts, it looks like it's blood. It sort of has that sort of terrifying, monstrous feeling to it, but maybe it's not as bad as it looks. But he makes a point of saying, oh, I made a mistake by loving Bella as if she were really my daughter, and I'm not going to do that again. This is a proper scientific experiment with Felicity. But Felicity never goes anywhere. So I wonder if there is that kind of, beyond science, the power of love is what has raised Bella from being a mere kind of creation to a person.
That makes it a lot more wholesome as well. If you look at it like that, it's that change in the kind of viewpoint of the mad science from sort of like a modern day surrealist art film with comedy, and this was critically acclaimed as well. It's a very different kind of film to Reanimator in terms of that, because Reanimator's this schlocky 80s VHS cult film about bringing people back to life and a very maniacal scientist who just wants to prove himself right. Whereas this takes mad science in a different direction. And because of that, and because it's Yorgos Lanthimos, who had kind of got to prominence now after doing The Favourites and then had a chance to do this, and it had been in his head for a long time to do this and adapt this book, which was previously written. And it went on to dizzying heights, right? So it won at the Oscars. It got several different Oscars, didn't it? Which Oscars did it get? The Academy Awards?
I think it was nominated for Best Picture, but I don't think it won. But Emma Stone did win Best Actress, and then it got some of the well-deserved technical awards like costume and makeup and production design, I think.
So it's like absolutely smashed it at the awards. And for this to be a sci-fi film with that kind of recognition is quite interesting, because I don't think everybody will view this as a sci-fi, even though it definitely is. There's no two ways about it. It starts with that mad science concept. You've got these crazy creations that Godwin's making, all of this kind of stuff. But I think it's that kind of credibility to a mad scientist story that isn't always there in cinema. Why do you think this kind of hits it? Is it because of those philosophical aspects and those interesting things that they're doing? They've kind of, it's not the mad science of filmmaking like you were saying, but it's the attention to detail with the craft and doing something a bit different. Why do you think it hits?
I think it's I think the reason the kind of sci-fi stuff works in the kind of Academy critical reception realm, which it doesn't always land in, is because it's using the Frankenstein template. That I don't know, that's just like a guess, but like that story is so just woven into everybody's DNA now, right? That you don't necessarily watch something that's based on Frankenstein and think about science fiction or even think about Frankenstein, really. It's so fundamental to popular culture and fiction and genre that you don't need to really think about Frankenstein to critically engage with it, or to critically engage with art that uses it and references it. It's just it's like the Beatles, right? You don't need to necessarily think about the Beatles to appreciate a song that is wholly dependent on the Beatles songwriting to even exist. You know, we've culturally sort of moved past that, but it's within all of us. Does that make sense? That I think there's an element of that is why it passes the turned up noses of the Academy at Sci-Fi.
And I think also because it does reflect the times in a different way, because if you go back to when the Frankenstein film was first made, you never would have imagined it turning into this kind of film. And especially like in terms of like the rules and regulations, we talked about the Hays Code before and all of that. Like there's like lots of sex scenes in this. It's very overt with everything that it's doing, but it's got this comedy tinge to it. But on top of all that, you've got a female character who is not just being made to be married off to a hideous monster. She is much more of an agent of her own destiny in this. It feels like that way anyway, even though she is people try to control her. People try to put these things on her, whether that be Mark Ruffalo's character or William Dafoe, or even like Max McCandless's Rami Youssef. And again, like every single male character in this is trying to put Bella into a box and do something with her, whether that's control her or like have sex with her. It's just like, it's all about the control elements, isn't it? But she can't be tamed. She's like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's the kind of driving force behind this. And she's not this monstrous creation. She, like you said, she is this woman who has her own sense of self by the end of it and kind of knows what she wants to do. And to the point where by the end of the film, she is going to become a doctor. She's doing all these like medical lectures at the same time as doing what she wants to do, which is observing all these men in this brothel and indulging in that kind of lifestyle. So she's very much the agent of her own destiny in this. And I think that gives the Frankenstein story a very different kind of spin.
Yeah. Yeah, the interactions with society that the creation has are, as you say, they're all about control and whether or not society, but patriarchal society specifically, is able to control her as much as it wants to. It, coming in the form of a series of men who want to have some control over her, and that's the story of the creation here, as opposed to one that's just rejected by society and constantly shunned and wanting to elbow its way in and just be accepted. Whereas Bella has really grand aspirations of wanting to change the world and make it a better place, because she is, she's at least accepted, even though it's not very nice the way she's accepted by society. But that at least gives her the agency to aspire to be more than Frankenstein's creation ever could, because all it wanted was to just be seen as human or equal to human and have a father and all of that stuff that it desired. Whereas Bella dreams for so much more and seems to get it by the end of the film, right?
Yeah, because
she's in a position of real power.
Yeah, she's very much living the life that she wants to do by the end of it. And despite all of these people trying to control her. And again, it goes back to the mad science aspect of it, doesn't it? Because in mad science, you've got scientists which are trying to control things that they can't control. And in this case, Godwin was trying to control aspects of Bella, which he knew that he couldn't. And most other mad scientist films are about failed experiments that go wrong and something terrible happens. But with this, it doesn't really seem the case, does it? Because Bella is a success, really. She has her own life and she does her own thing, and she becomes this person from this creation that Godwin has made at the beginning. Yeah.
I think there's something in Godwin's aims being somewhat unspecific. He's not this... I don't think he's the egomaniac who wants to conquer death, because isn't there an element in this film that Godwin can just resurrect anyone, kind of? Like, that doesn't actually seem to be a huge deal for Godwin, the fact that he brought her back to life. The sort of interesting experiment to him was the swapping of the brains, right?
Yeah.
Because he's got all these like mad chimera creatures running around the house. He sort of does a lot of mad science kind of aimlessly, or he doesn't necessarily discuss what he wants to get out of that. And it seems to be, I might be misremembering, but it seems to me that he is able to bring people back to life, and that wasn't what's amazing about it. But the fact that he switched the brains is what's so dramatic. So he doesn't like necessarily have the same goals, certainly not of like Herbert West. And that maybe also frees up Bella a little bit as well to be her own person, instead of just being an experiment, a mad science experiment that happens to develop personhood. She is more free to be a person, as we all are, right? She's just this interesting accident of creation that goes on to be a human being, as all of us are.
But then she definitely becomes a mad scientist by the end, because she puts Alfie's brain inside a goat and then switches them out. So lovely mad science to end the film on. But it's a very interesting way that mad science has developed into the 2020s and beyond. It's morphed in lots of different ways, but it's still there in cinema. And I mean, it's going to keep coming up. There's already another Frankenstein being made, and all of these things are just, people will keep going back to the well of the Frankenstein story, I feel.
Yeah, I like this reinterpreting of it, though. Proper reinterpreting, not just rebooting and remaking, but remixing and, like I say, just using the tropes that are so embedded in our cultural DNA without having to necessarily say this is a Mary Shelley's Frankenstein adaptation. We get it. We know it. We can do different things with it now. Get some green goo in there and some syringes and cast Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's why you get stuff like The Substance coming out now as well.
Yeah.
So it's this. So you've got elements of Reanimator, you've got elements of Poor Things, and you've got these new exciting mad science films coming out. So long may it continue.
Absolutely, and we will continue to look at some of those contemporary mad science films as our series goes on.
Yes, we will indeed. So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Journey Through Sci-Fi. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to hear more episodes, and they'll come freshly into your feed as soon as they come out.
You can visit our website for more information about the show, or find us on your social media platform of choice. Search for Through Sci-Fi Pod or Journey Through Sci-Fi, and we will show up there.
And if you want a free and easy way to support the podcast, why not leave us a review? It really helps us out with those pesky algorithms, and it's a quick and easy way to help new listeners discover the show.
If you want to get access to all of our bonus content, come on over to patreon.com/journey through sci-fi, where we have patrons picks and miniseries, and we review new sci-fi films out in cinemas. You can join there and get all of those episodes.
Yes, lots of stuff over there on Patreon. But next time on the show, we will be looking at Good and Mad Scientists. We'll be looking at 2 new films, and those films are, Matt?
The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension from 1984.
Say that 5 times fast.
And The City of Lost Children from 1995.
Yes, so we've got 1 good mad scientist and 1 very bad mad scientist in those ones. So it'll be interesting to contrast and compare. Maybe very similar to what we've seen today in Reanimator and Poor Things. Who knows?
Heroes and villains. Okay, well, join us for that, listeners. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon.